Namaste. Welcome to Vedic Vidya. My name is Jeffrey Armstrong, Kavindra Rishi. Vedic Vidya is available exclusively on Chitty Media English channel on Sunday nights at 7 p.m. IST. Our topic tonight is how the word God, G-O-D, came from India to the Western world and Christianity, or the real origin and meaning of the words Bhagavan and God. Thank God. Oh, wait. But that's such a common expression, isn't it? And a few others that I won't say. It's a multi-purpose kind of word. But here's the thing about English. Not only do we often abuse words by using them in a variety of situations that they're not right for, but we actually don't ask, where do they come from, of our words. Now with everyday words, and, not, or, even, for example, Miller as a last name used to be because you were a miller. It used to be because that's what you were doing. You were milling grain. But those words now are just names. They're not attached to functions. So naming is a very important issue when you're trying to make explanations of very subtle and profound reality. So it shows up the most in words where we're pointing to something big. God. Or Bhagavan. Now, just a little bit of background. Our English language evolved over a couple thousand years out of various root languages in the country we call England. And then it was influenced. French invaded for a while, and so they left French behind. English is a polyglot language. And that's one of the reasons we don't ask where words came from, because we got them from so many places. Then we got a huge download from German, and there's a lot of Celtic and other cultures in the background. Then, during the Renaissance, people like Shakespeare invented words. Then there was a download of about 2,000 Latin words into English because it wasn't smart enough as a language. And so, since English-speaking people went out and colonized the world with gunpowder, it wasn't their language that colonized the world, it was their gunpowder. It was brute force and violence. And in that process, called colonization, various cultures were contacted, and knowledge from those cultures was taken and appropriated by Western civilization. And until right now, until this generation, most people haven't paid much attention to this. It's important now because the several hundred million Western yogis who are all practicing yoga, a practice developed in India, and carrying Indian culture around the world right now massively. You can be sure that Sanskrit, the language, the ancient language of India, is now coming into the lives of all of those yoga practitioners. Meanwhile, I don't know anyone who's Christian, and no disrespect, who has asked, where did the word God come from? And what does the word actually mean? If someone says, I believe in God, you actually have to ask for an explanation. You say, okay, but what do you mean by that? Why? Because the word doesn't have a single meaning that's agreed upon to everyone. So you have to ask them what their definition is of that word. But usually those definitions are in the dictionary. But if you look in a dictionary and say, what does God mean? They just sort of ramble on and go off in different directions because they know it depends on what church you go to, what religion you're in, whether you're religious or not. But the word doesn't have an official meaning. So that's step one. You've got to understand that. And if you doubt it, look it up in an etymological dictionary. The next part of this, it gets interesting. Really deep and interesting English words didn't come from English. They weren't invented in the English language. They migrated in. And the word God migrated from Dutch, where it was gut. Instead of G-U-D, G-O-D, it was G-U-T, gut. And it went into Dutch from German, where it was Gutam, G-H-U-T-A-M, G-H-U-T-A-M, Gutam. Gutam, gut, God. See the progression? Now, here's the part that during colonization, nobody wanted you to know. And even still, to some degree. That is that it was originally a word from Sanskrit. And Sanskrit is the language that's the basis of German, not Latin. That's what makes German quite unique and different from the other European languages. It's Sanskrit-based. Sanskrit, as you may or may not know, is the classical language of India. It's the most ancient one and the most perfect one. It has a very perfect grammar, 50 letters in the alphabet, precise rules of grammar. So Sanskrit doesn't vary or change across time. Almost all other languages drift. It's called linguistic drift. And this is what happened to God. The pronunciation drifted. Gutam, gut, God. But there's a step missing that no one's told you about. And most etymological dictionaries, like the Oxford, didn't include this because they didn't want culture starting in India. It was part of the colonizing that was going on. They didn't want the arrows pointing to India as to where these concepts came from. So they left that out. But it turns out that now, you've heard about this. You've seen the so-called pagan fire sacrifice. Somebody's lighting a fire and they're offering their food and they're chanting mantras and they're doing something. And that has been demonized by Christianity and Islam as worshiping lesser beings. And that's not what's happening at all. Actually, the so-called lesser beings are all the helpers in the cosmos. Actually, our word in English, Deus, which is actually Latin, coming into English, if you said God is Deus, then you've gone back to the Latin, and Deus is from Deva in Sanskrit, meaning all these words are migrating. So here's where the English word God came from. Gut, gutam, hutam. The Sanskrit is hutam, H-U-T-A-M, which just migrated to gu, and then gut, and then God. The similarity of the letters are the secret of the migration. And linguists are all aware of this, if they're really studied. So now, that fire, where things are being offered to the divines in some way or the other, was to say thank you to them and to reciprocate with them. It was saying we want to cooperate with the laws of nature. So before we eat, since you made the wood, the earth did, and the food that we're cooking, we're going to say thank you for that, and we're going to take a vow that we won't destroy the planet while we're taking from it. We'll recycle. We'll cooperate. So that is called a yajna. That fire offering is a way of sealing the contract by giving a little bite of the food to where it came from. And the smoke rises up from the fire, and you say thank you for dinner. Now, that smoke carrying the offering is called hutam. And that is the meaning of the Christian word God. That's it. It's actually, ironically, a small part of the pagan fire sacrifice that Christianity learned to hate so well. So it's very ironic. And the word doesn't have any other meaning than that. except that it's been used to point to someone or something that goes beyond that. But that isn't what it means. What it means is that's also divine, that offering, and that saying thank you, and that's also divine, that saying thank you and offering up to the many beings that are making life possible. So let's talk about those for just a moment. Those are called devas and devis. Now just imagine the government that's in charge of whatever country you live in. There are many different levels of that government, and all of those persons in that government are doing something important. Now, if somebody asked you, who's doing that, you wouldn't say, oh, the president. Though you may be right that ultimately the president is. But really you'd say, oh, this councilman, or that congressman, or that senator, or that member of this group, their department is doing this. So the so-called many gods are not gods. They're many beings serving in the universe as the laws of nature. So all the ancient civilizations practiced ecology by making an offering before they ate, and India included, and saying thank you for dinner, like I said, and promising to recycle and to circulate. Now, that is one word. So what is the Sanskrit word then for the ultimate being that God has been used for? Thought you'd never ask. It's Bhagavan. Now in Sanskrit, each word has a precise meaning. So hutam, the smoke arising from that sacred fire, is a lesser name of Bhagavan. And Bhagavan is the being that most English speakers mean when they say God, but they don't have a definition. So Bhaga means all of the things in life that attract us and that make life worthwhile. And Van means that divine person who is the source of all of those. That's the definition, Bhagavan. And you might have heard of the Bhagavad Gita, which is a book written in Sanskrit from India. That's the summary of the philosophy and viewpoint and worldview of that culture. And Bhagavad, or Bhagavan, means the time when the Supreme Being came to earth and spoke knowledge to humans. That's the premise of the Bhagavad Gita. So Bhagavan has 6 qualities: beauty, wealth, strength, knowledge, fame, and generosity. This is a definition, the one that God doesn't have. Remember, God doesn't have a definition because its definition is hutam, the smoke arising from a Vedic, you said pagan, I say Vedic, yajna, offering of thanks. Bhagavan means that person who is the source of all of the things that we find attractive in life. Everything that's beautiful, everything that's knowledgeable or contains knowledge or is based on knowledge. All the things we call wealth, all the opulences, all of those desirable objects, all of those are emanations from that ultimate being, Bhagavan. This word has meaning: beauty, wealth, fame. The most famous being Bhagavan. Everyone has a concept for the ultimate supreme, Bhagavan. Beauty, wealth, strength, fame, knowledge. All knowledge comes from a source, from the grand intelligence that is the source of everything. Beauty, wealth, strength, fame, knowledge, generosity, and a lack of attachment to anything. Why? Because the source of everything has everything. It's the person with everything. This vocabulary gives us new words that expand our definitions and open us to see things in a broader way and in a greater way. It is the Vedic civilization of India that had a language from which much of the European languages evolved over time, thousands of years ago. And now, because yoga is sweeping the world, because communication and modern technology has allowed us to communicate with each other all over the world, we're now sharing culture all over the world. And so, etymologies become revealed. Word origins become revealed. Origins that were being hidden because of colonization or because certain traditions, religions didn't want people to know their predecessors or where they got their knowledge from. But all of this is now coming out. The coming out party is that hundreds of millions of yogis are practicing this around the world, and no one paid for that to happen. They're just hungry. Really, we humans go for knowledge eventually because we're hungry for it. So God is a three-letter word that doesn't really carry the meaning that you hoped. So now here's the next secret. When a text is translated from Sanskrit and it says Bhagavan, then the word God is not a synonym. It does not mean the same thing. It has a different meaning. It's the smoke arising. It's hutam. And hutam is not the same as Bhagavan. It's a little piece of Bhagavan. Just as the president of the company and the workers at various levels are not identical, they're just in the same enterprise. Hutam is a small worker word down here, and from it came Gutam, Gut, and God. So God is a two-bit word in terms of meaning. It's not how it's being used in meaning. It's a borrowed feather that dropped from the beautiful peacock that is India and Sanskrit. And that borrowed feather was cut, reduced, made small, and now used as the name, as a synonym for Bhagavan. But it is not. This is part of the linguistic revolution that's accompanying the technological revolution. This is very important for you to understand. Without a vocabulary, you cannot program. And all of the devices that we're using now work because they've been programmed. What you may not know is that Sanskrit is the scientific basis of those programming languages and the mathematics that are concealed in Sanskrit in India. All of this knowledge that was originally in the Sanskrit library of the Vedic civilization of India are rooted in the Sanskrit language that doesn't change as it goes forward through time. And it is time that Western civilization started learning these distinctions instead of just being in reaction or saying, well, God means the same thing as Bhagavan. No, like any other word, water doesn't mean fire. Fire and water don't mean earth. Each one means something different. And when that meaning is clear, you use the word clearly. So now, hopefully, you'll use God with a little more understanding and look for other words for what you're trying to address when you speak with that being who is the source of everything, aka Bhagavan. That being with all of the 6 things that are desirable to an unlimited degree. Thanks for listening. Vedic Vidya means shining the light of truth. Tune in to Vedic Vidya on the Chitty English channel Sunday night, 7 p.m. IST. My name is Kavindra Rishi, Jeffrey Armstrong. See you next time. And have a Namas day.
Please remember to subscribe to us and switch on the notifications for this channel. For our other social media links, more content, and to support our work, please visit citti.net. Dhanyavad. Namaskar.